Good morning, and welcome to TAO's next session of our Member Resiliency series with Jeff Hilimire, author of The Crisis Turnaround. I'm Skip Newberry, President and CEO of TAO. A couple of rules of engagement before we get started. All participants have been muted, so please remain on mute unless a member of the TAO team unmutes you and calls on you to speak. You may ask or respond to questions in the chat box publicly or privately by directing your message to Justin Martinez or Kara Snow, and we'll monitor the chat box and respond throughout the discussion. We'll ask you all to engage via the participant icon on your screen. Please engage with us on social media throughout. If you want to take a screenshot of myself and Jeff chatting away and then share that, we will guarantee you we will reshare it as well. And we also ask that due to the limited time, we'll capture all questions in the chat and shift any unanswered ones to Mobilize, which is our online member engagement platform. And we'll post all the unanswered questions there from this discussion to keep the conversation going. If you have any questions about joining Mobilize, please reach out to Justin, whose email is on the screen. And if you have any questions about joining TAO, please reach out to membership@techoregon.org. TAO staff support today is provided by Kara Snow and Justin Martinez. They're happy to take feedback, questions, comments, or discuss sponsorship opportunities. In partnership with Free Geek, the business community is hosting a Tech Now initiative, which is a series of contactless drive-through technology collection sites across the Portland metro area over a 2-week period beginning on May 27th. There will be a collection site hosted in the TAO parking lot on Sunday, May 31st. Employers are encouraged to share the campaign with their employees and customers, and the general community is also encouraged to participate. Our ambitious goal is to collect 10,000 devices through both technology and financial contributions. As current estimates show that there are 75,000 computers needed by Oregon students to support distance learning. A huge thank you to Packstar and their CEO, Peggy Miller. We couldn't do this series without her support. Please join us on Wednesday, May 27th for our next session with Josh Harwood, who's the Chief Economist with the City of Portland. We'll be discussing what indicators economists are relying on to provide insight as local economies ramp back up. It's now my pleasure to introduce Jeff Hilimire, author of The Crisis Turnaround and CEO of Dragon Army. Jeff is the CEO of Dragon Army, father of 5, co-founder of 48 and 48, which is a global civic hackathon, and Ripples of Hope, which is a nonprofit leadership empowerment group. So Jeff, thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Skip.
Well, might as well hop right into questions. So I thought it'd be good if maybe you could start by telling us a little bit about your background and where are you joining us from today?
Yes, I'm in Atlanta. I think you can see behind me the artwork from some of those 5 children that you mentioned. Yeah, so I've been an entrepreneur since college. I started my first company in the dorm room at UNC Charlotte and have been starting companies ever since. Learned a lot along the way, and currently CEO of Dragon Army. We're a purpose-driven digital agency, about 25 employees.
Great. And so you recently wrote a book. And I'm wondering, what was sort of the impetus for the book? Like, what inspired you?
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. I wrote my first book 2 years ago and got it out last year. This time around, I was going to write a book about culture, and then this crisis hit us all. And so as I was sort of swirling around, trying to lead my company, talking to other leaders, trying to lead their companies, I just realized that maybe the book should be about leading during a crisis. I've certainly, led my companies through 9/11, through the 08-09 crash, and thought that, there might be some experiences that I could share that might help others. When I think about why I write, it's usually one of 2 factors or both if possible. One is, I hope that I have something to say and some experience to share, but also I wanted to help others. And so writing a book about crisis and leading your team or department or company during a crisis, I thought it would be a worthwhile exercise.
That's great. And so in terms of, some of the insights that you gained having run the company through, both, the 08-09 crisis and then now today, like what are some insights that, you would draw from that experience, and what can folks expect in the book?
Yeah, the book is written as a either a fable or a narrative. I find that it's easier for me to write in sort of a first-person story type way. So in the book, there's a leader who has to lead his company through this crisis. So, I think as I broke the book down and broke even how I've been leading my company through this, there's three phases. There's how you start a crisis, which is sort of a weird thing to say, but your company has hopefully been putting things in place that will help you start this. Whether for us, that's things like building trust, having open, transparent financials, really focusing on our culture. And that sort of built the foundation for our ability to start a major problem like this. The middle part is about having a plan. It's about doing your best to be open and honest throughout, getting feedback from your team, and really as a leader, sharing hope. And because, none of us know how long this is going to last. I mean, here we are, we're still in the middle of it. And so being able to tell your team, this is what you can expect, but this is some things we just don't know yet. And communicating that and having a plan is important. And then I think always we want to come out of a situation like this learning. And so there's, words are being thrown around here now, like pivot, which have been very common in the startup world. But now everybody's talking about how are we going to pivot? What are we going to learn and do differently and maybe do better as we come out of this crisis? So that's sort of how I broke the book down. And depending on where a leader is in that part of the process, maybe they can dive in and find things that will help them get through to the next phase.
Mm-hmm. And so in terms of the premise, it definitely differs a bit from the 5-day turnaround, which is, be the leader you always wanted to be. In terms of like the actual writing process, how long does it typically take you? I mean, you've now written a couple, so.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the 5-day turnaround was my first book. It is, the idea of it is to be able to lead like an entrepreneur. So a lot of my friends are leaders, but not entrepreneurs. And so I wrote the book to say, here's things that I've seen and done as a successful entrepreneur, but really learned from other successful entrepreneurs that I really think anybody can embody. What's different about the crisis turnaround is it's very specifically focused on this point in time. And, God willing, we're all going to sail through the next 20 or 30 years with no crises. But assuming that happens, I think this book becomes relevant during those times. 5 days, a bit more general and can sort of help people lead through any time.
Yep.
It took me about a year to write the first draft of the 5-day turnaround. With this book, I didn't have the idea to write it until I would say late March. And then in a 9 to 10 day period, I wrote the first draft. I just put everything aside and said, I need to get this book out as fast as possible. Fortunately, my leadership team at Dragon Army said, all right, we'll steer the ship while you do this. And then it's taken us about a month to get it published. So I would say it's about a 45-day book process to get this one out.
Wow, that is some seriously agile, rapid innovation right there. Impressive.
Yeah, I can remember when I first told my team that I was going to try to do this. They were like, "Wait, the first book took about a year and a half from start to finish," but they jumped on board and they said, "Look, we can help get it out."
That's awesome. So let's dive into some of the specifics of the book, and I'm wondering. Tell us in some greater detail, like walk us through some of the various sections. And, I'd also love to hear along the way, just from the 9 to 10 days in which you cranked it out, like, was it a linear process?
Yeah. So, I think there's a couple of things that I would say. We in the business world, we in leadership talk about culture and the importance of culture. And culture is always important. It's especially important during difficult times. So, I think really leaning into your values and bringing those to life, making sure that your team builds trust, is vulnerable. These are things that I found that we do well at Dragon Army, but there was some room for growth during this period. So we're being even more open and honest and sharing more. That I think is something that everybody can do more of and continue to get better at. So I think that's one of the big lessons or focus areas in how do you start a crisis. I think also getting comfortable with having a little more open and honest conversations in terms of people's feelings. One of the things I learned through just living through this process, is that when you're with people in an office and you're there day to day, you start to understand when they're having a bad day or when something's up. But when you're remote, it's really hard to do that. So even through video conference, you don't always see it. So we're trying to be a little bit more diligent about checking in on our team members and really seeing how they're feeling. And, you know, everybody's dealing with this stress differently, and there's ups and downs. So that's something that I think, in particular to this quarantine type crisis, we all can do a better job of really checking in on our team members. And then I'd say the last thing is, this is something where I wrote it in the book and then realized we needed to be doing it at Dragon Army, was that a big part of our ethos is doing good in the world and being kind. Our purpose at Dragon Army is to inspire happiness. And one of the ways we do that is lots of engagement with the community. Well, the first month or two of the crisis, we were just, really focusing inwardly, which we needed to do to protect ourselves. As I wrote the book, I had the leader in the book sort of force his team to do a big community activity. Even though there was some griping at the beginning, what ended up happening is the team in the book really started to feel like they were together again and feel proud of themselves and what they were doing. And then I was like, well, gosh, we should be doing that at Dragon Army. Like, we normally do this. So we've been doing a lot. We've created kindness packages that we're giving out to hospitals and things. So I think, it can be easy to say, okay, everything's going terribly, we're having to cut expenses, let's just focus on our team. But maybe what your team does need is an opportunity to either use their skills to do good, or at least come together as a group to do some good in the world, because it's going to make them feel more like themselves, and it's going to make them feel good.
Mm-hmm. So as we think about this kind of interplay between the values and ethos of Dragon Army and also kind of what's carried you throughout your career, I mean, we were talking in the virtual green room right beforehand, and we were talking a bit about some of your experiences with the conscious capitalism movement and sort of values-driven businesses, mission-driven businesses. I'm wondering, has that been a consistent theme throughout your career? And if so, I'm wondering if there are certain things that you feel have really helped sustain Dragon Army and your other businesses that relate to that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I actually had a bit of an awakening in 2012, 2013, where I was, I started my first company in 1998 and was a leader simply because I started a company, not because I've been through any MBA program or had any experience. I was a 22-year-old, CEO of a tiny company. But as we grew, it was exciting and I was learning. But in 2012, I went through a leadership program, the first one I'd ever been through in Atlanta, and it opened my eyes to what I would call the immense amount of privilege that I have because I'm a man, because I'm white, because I'm straight. I have every privilege check mark that you can give to a human being, and I didn't really realize that up until that moment. I just had been ignorant of what was really happening in the world. And so from that point forward, I landed on my personal purpose of having an outsized positive impact on the world. Since then, I started Dragon Army, and if I'm going to have an outsized positive impact on the world with anything that I do, Dragon Army has to be a force for good in the world. So now I'm a big believer in this idea that business should be a force for good, that businesses can affect change in ways that nonprofits can't or government entities can't. And so I've been really leaning into that. So Dragon Army is extremely purpose-driven, but my previous companies were not, even though they were successful. Since then, I started 48 and 48 and Ripples of Hope, as you mentioned, all in order to try to push forward business as a force for good and unlock people's ability to do more good. So definitely, it's almost like I can say there's a pre-finding my purpose and a post-finding my purpose. And when I get asked, what do you regret most in your career? My typical answer has been, I don't really regret anything. There's times when I made mistakes and I've learned. There's lots of times I've made mistakes and I continue to try to learn. But really, the only thing I regret is not finding my purpose earlier, because I think I could have done more good. So now I'm trying to catch up and see how much I can lean into that.
That's great. One thing that I've been thinking a lot about is this intersection between different sectors. And in the public sector, there's been a little bit of an issue over the last, I don't know, decade plus with government not necessarily being as in tune with constituents. And this idea of having like almost like a customer success function that's proactive within government that's, trying to delight constituents as opposed to reacting to customer ticket requests and to fill potholes and pay fines, right, which is a negative experience. Businesses, on the other hand, are really good at the customer success function, the proactive piece of it. And so to your point about like how business is increasingly filling voids where government can't do something necessarily to achieve a social good, or maybe even nonprofits can't in some cases given their structure, is a really fascinating idea. And you mentioned earlier in the discussion this connection point with the community and how that's vital to your business. And I'm wondering, do you see like an innovation feedback loop happening there and maybe an employee retention feedback loop that's happening? Can you talk a little bit more about how you've structured Dragon Army and sort of the power behind that approach?
Yeah, no, that's a really great point. It's not why we have a purpose and it's not why we do good, but I do find that people today, and maybe always, but certainly people today, want to feel like they're a part of a company they can believe in and that they're making a difference. It seems to me, especially in, call it the creative and technology field, which is what we're in, that people aspire to have a bigger impact than simply, coming in, pushing some buttons and going home every day. And so what I do think is, we have what you might expect, which is pretty high retention. And even from a client perspective, we're extremely honest with clients. If we mess up, we tell them before they find out about it. We make up for the mistakes. And those kind of honest conversations lead to long-lasting relationships. I have seen, just through some of the activities we do as a company, that the team bonds more through doing good. There's something really powerful about using your superpower, your skills to do good in the world. It rarely happens. Usually you're participating in a nonprofit event, you're helping people out, but you're not using the trade that you have or the skills that you have. And that's what 48 and 48 does, but that's specifically what we try to do with Dragon Army, is how can we allow our team members to work together using what makes them awesome to do good in the world. And I do think that leads to a stronger culture, a deeper bond. We also solicit feedback and want and get from our team, like, here's things that you guys are doing, them saying to leadership that really could be changed and we'd like to see you improve. And so we listen and we try hard to react to that because we want everybody to feel like they're part of this thing and that they can actually influence the direction that we go.
That's great. We got a question in real time here from one of the attendees who happens to be a B Corp owner as well. And, they're wondering, how can we get businesses to do more good with the focus on increasing profits at all costs? And their observation is it seems like most businesses mainly see doing good as a way to help the bottom line alone. Do you see some tension there? Is it zero sum? Does it have to be?
There's a lot of tension there. It's a very astute, whoever asked that question knows what they're talking about. I have attended events where the purpose of the event is companies that believe business should be a force for good. And what I've seen is it's really just people networking to get new clients. The way that conscious capitalism and B Corp is typically sold in is on, hey, you can do this and make more money doing so, which I understand, but it's not the reason that we should be doing it. So I do find that there's a lot of, there's a big challenge in finding people who are genuine about wanting to build a business as a force for good. One of the things that, one of the ways I'm trying to do that is Dragon Army's been one of the faster growing companies in Atlanta. We're known for all these things that we do in the community. And I want people to see that, like, as we have success and as I can build companies, for instance, that most of what I care about and talk about is doing good, so that maybe other leaders can say, instead of saying, when I retire, I'm gonna invest more and donate more and stuff, but I got to just work on my business now. You actually have a bigger voice when you're running a company to affect others to change. So I'm looking at it a little bit more of as an inside out type of thing, that if someone says, oh, this guy's been successful, oh wait, look at all this stuff he does in the community, how does he do both of those things? And maybe they can lean into it more.
That's great. So in terms of the growth of the company, I was wondering if you could tell me a little bit about like how you've been able to put it together, structure it. So I assume from an ownership standpoint that you own the company, or you and your partners own the company, so no outside investment?
Well, I have some local investors that are, friends that always sort of said, hey, when you do the next thing, I want to be a part of it. So I have some local, but yeah, no, we're independently run. No sort of holding company or big VCs that are telling us what to do. And I tell you what that allows me to do. So my first two companies we built and we sold. We hit our numbers and we sold the companies. With Dragon Army, it's not even on my roadmap. I'm really looking to build a forever company. And so what that does is it does free you up to say, okay, it's fine for me to have a lower profit, but put that money back into my team. It's fine
Yep.
for me to invest right in the things that we're doing and be comfortable with that. Yes, we could grow a little bit faster, but I'm building something that I want to be rock solid, and a model maybe for other companies that want to be a force for good. So having that long-term perspective really allows us to make decisions that are absolutely the best for the company. For instance, if that we find out their values don't align with ours, or they're not treating us well, it's an easier decision to say, you know what, we're walking away from that client. We're looking for partners that want to be good citizens. And so that long-term view has helped us tremendously.
What strikes me is that the company should really be located in Portland. I mean, I don't know why it's in Atlanta. No, I'm kidding. Sort of. I'm only partially kidding. So there's my pitch for a West Coast office at this point. But yeah, no, I think there's the message and the values of the company really resonate in terms of what I've seen in the ethos here in the community, having been here about 15 years now. Very different from what I experienced in the East Coast earlier in my career. And I think people see it as kind of special, but what's cool is that you are demonstrating firsthand that there are really successful, values-driven businesses springing up all over the U.S. There's no one community that has a lock on this, and you can succeed despite political environments and all sorts of other sort of variables that you can't necessarily control for when you start a business. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what your experience has been kind of Atlanta, and also like what are some of the things that you see as impacts you're having on the broader community and kind of changing the narrative a bit?
Yeah, Atlanta is absolutely a city that I believe in. I've heard amazing things about Portland, so I'm sure it's an amazing place to put up camp and build a company that aspires to be a force for good. I do find that Atlanta is a great place for that. There's a lot of people that they want to build a business in Atlanta, but it's not as cutthroat as some other places, but it's still competitive. And so there's this nice positive energy happening here, and I see a lot of companies looking to make a difference. There's a huge nonprofit community in Atlanta, a lot of tons of small entrepreneurial ones, but also some of the larger nonprofits in the country are located here. So, in terms of the impact that we've made, I look at first and say, are the 25 full-time team members that we have today, are they more aware of their privilege? Are they more empathetic? Are they out there trying to do good in the world, even when they're not a part of Dragon Army? That's sort of the first lens that I look at. And so for instance, we brought in really powerful motivational nonprofit speakers into the office so that they can infect my team with the good that needs to be done in the world. And so I look at it from that lens first. Are we putting out happier people into the community who have a drive to do good? Beyond that, we're very involved in 48 and 48, which I would say has probably rebuilt over 200 nonprofit websites in Atlanta alone over the last 5 years. So we're doing things, tactically, but also I think more broadly, just trying to spread happiness and a want to do good.
Yep. Yeah, so we got another real-time question from one of the attendees. So with the book, you've got like 43 key points to follow to get your business through any challenge. You've got business hacks to ensure you're making the most of your time, and then easy to follow rules for remote work and teams. And someone's like, hey, what if I didn't get one of the 10 free books? Where else can I get it?
Great question. Yeah, so the book, to get it out as fast as possible, we put it out on Kindle, and I know that so it's available on Amazon right now on Kindle. I know that a lot of people prefer paperback or hardback version, which I sort of do for business books as well. And so hopefully in the next month and a half or so, we'll get that out. And so you could definitely go to Amazon and get it now. But one of the ways is you can sign up for my email list. I put out a weekly email where I talk about some of the things we just discussed, but certainly give updates on the book. And I'm going to be giving away some free books as well. So you can go to my website, jeffhilimire.com, or you can actually text the word purpose, PURPOSE, to 66866. And that's an easy way to just sign up and get that. And then you'll be alerted when the new book's out.
Awesome. That's great. And so we've been asking the same somewhat irreverent question of all of our featured guests during this series, which is, in this virtual environment we now find ourselves, what's the most awkward or embarrassing moment you've had dealing with online conferencing tools?
I was thinking about that. I don't know that I specifically had one, but I did have a colleague who had someone jump in and do one of those spam inappropriate joinings of a Zoom call. I won't go into details, but the story was funny, and luckily they canceled the Zoom before the most inappropriate part happened, so it wasn't as awful as it could have been. Unfortunately, I haven't had that yet, and I think soon after that is when Zoom said, "Hey, we're going to put passwords on most of these things," so that's helped.
Yep. I think they just bought a network security company too.
Right, smart.
Yeah, they're listening. Cool. Well, thank you, Jeff, for taking some time out of your busy schedule to spend with us. I know a lot of the folks, in terms of feedback I've been getting in real time, have enjoyed the discussion. To the extent we have additional questions that come up, we'll make sure to follow up with you after the fact on those and get those posted into Mobilize. Any final thoughts you want to leave the audience with?
Well, first of all, thanks, Skip, for having me. Kara, you guys are awesome. I really appreciate this opportunity. I would just, my sort of thing that I like everyone to think about is try to lead with purpose. Find your personal purpose. It changed my life when I found it. There's lots of books, or if you send me an email, I can give you thoughts on how to do it. But find your purpose and then lean into it as much as possible.
Awesome. Well, your story is really inspiring, and hopefully we inspired a few of the attendees this morning. Yeah, if you haven't already checked out the book, hopefully those of you who attended will go and grab a copy. And also a big thank you to Peggy Miller and Packstar again for their series sponsorship. So thank you, Jeff. Have a great weekend, and thank you all for attending.